Greetings, booktubers. Welcome back to Grammaticus Books. And today on Grammaticus Books, we're going to be starting a new reading project that I hope to be able to finish by the end of the year, by the end of 2024. And that project is to read all of Lois McMaster Bujold's award-winning Vorkosigan Saga series before the end of the year, starting with the first book and reading them in order. Now, there is some debate about where the start of this series is. And I also will say here at the start of this video that there will be some spoilers going forward on this book and the other books in the series that I do review. But generally speaking, this is the first book in the series Shards of Honor that predates the birth of and the introduction of the main character in the series, who is Miles Vorkosigan. This book here is actually about how Miles Vorkosigan's parents meet on this far world where they are doing an astronomical survey, his mother is, where she encounters his father, who is from an enemy planet of Baryar, and his name is Vorkosigan. If you're not familiar with this series, this is a very good series. This is a reread for me. I actually read this series decades and decades ago with an asterisk after that, and that asterisk is, I think I only read the books dealing with Miles Vorkosigan and didn't read this book back decades ago. So I think this is a first read for me. In fact, I'm almost certain that it is. Now, some people say this is the first book in the series. However, others say that this is actually the first book in the Vorkosigan Saga, which is Falling Free, which was published 2 years after this in 1988. So this book was published in 1988, and Shards of Honor was published in 1986. Now, there are quite a few websites out there that cite this as the first book in the Vorkosigan novel. I read this quite by happenstance, quite by chance, a couple of months ago, before I had even decided to start this series. And then started looking it up and saw that this book was actually included in it as the start of it. It takes place chronologically 200 years prior to the events here in Shards of Honor. And I don't know why, I'll be brutally honest, I don't know why this book is considered the start of the saga. Other than taking place in the same universe as Shards of Honor and the following books, there is nothing in here that has anything to do with the Vorkosigan Saga as far as I can see. If somebody else knows otherwise, please put it down in the comments section below as to why people consider this to be the start of the Vorkosigan Saga, because I can't figure it out for the life of me. Now, I did read this book. It is a Nebula award-winning book for Best Science Fiction Novel of the Year, 1988, as per the Nebula Awards, and I will go over it here at the end of this video. But this video, I'm going to concentrate mostly here on this book, Shards of Honor. Shards of Honor, 1986. Generally considered to be the start of the Vorkosigan Saga. It is about how Miles Vorkosigan's parents, Cordelia Naismith of Beta Colony and Aral Vorkosigan of the planet Baryar, came to meet and became his parents. And it's sort of your typical war trope about two enemy soldiers that are thrown together, that are stranded together on a hostile planet under hostile conditions, and then have to combine and use their combined talents and resources, working together instead of as enemies in order to survive. You've got that time-tried and tested theme and trope that runs through this novel, but with a twist, because these two enemy soldiers wind up becoming lovers. And that is how the Cordelia Naismith and Vorkosigan eventually become the mother and the father of Miles Vorkosigan. But I'm going to go ahead and read you guys the back blurb off of Shards of Honor here. And here's the back blurb. In the wrong place at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. She even wore the wrong uniform. Cordelia Naismith, Baden Expeditionary Force, had been hurried into battle, still wearing her old tan astronomical survey fatigues. Now, captain of a throwaway ship on a mission of deception, she convoys a weapon of wicked subtlety to entrap and destroy an enemy armada. But Cordelia will discover deception within deception, treachery within treachery, until finally she is forced into a separate peace with her chief opponent, Lord Vorkosigan. It is a peace that earns her only ignominy, even though it foreshadows a new beginning for herself, her lover, and both their peoples. That's a pretty good description of the book here. So the book starts off with Cordelia Naismith leading a astronomical survey group on this very undeveloped planet. And then her opponent here, Lord Vorkosigan, Vorkosigan, comes to the planet as part of an attack plan that is being carried out by the planet Baryar, who are very aggressive, very militaristic, and they come down and they attack her group while she is off with another one doing part of the survey. And when she comes back, It winds up being her. She's the only person left who's either fled or is still alive of her survey group. One of her survey group is wounded severely mentally. He has a disruptor beam that hits him that affects him mentally, so he's really not all there. And Lord Vorkosigan, Earl Vorkosigan, is the only person left from his military group that went down to attack this astronomical survey team on this planet. Because when he comes down to the planet's surface, there is a group of mutineers who are attempting to assassinate him and take over control of his ship. So he was stranded on the surface of the planet. Cordelia Naismith is stranded on the surface of the planet, and the two of them have to work their way approximately 100 kilometers across this very hostile terrain in order to get to a supply cache where they can get medicine, food, supplies, and radio equipment in order to get Errol Vorkosigan back onto his ship so he can try to take control of his ship back away from the hijackers and the mutineers. And that's the start of the book. And it has that predictable trope about two enemies who are thrown together, who then learn about each other, come to respect each other a little bit more, and in this case become lovers and eventually give birth to Miles Vorkosigan. And it has a lot of great twists and turns in it. You do have plots within plots. You have treachery within treachery. And the thing that I liked is that you get back to the Baryarans, to their ship and to their culture and to their homeworld, and they're always portrayed as being very aggressive, very militaristic, very barbaric, very quick to use force and torture on their opponents and to resort to assassination in their politics. And then you go back and contrast that with Cordelia Naismith, where she winds up towards the latter half of the book back on Beta Colony. And while there isn't as much violence or outright use of force and barbarity in their tactics, they're every bit as uncivilized, but just in a more smooth and subtle manner than the Baryarans and Vorkosigan and his military group. They're doing the same thing to her, but they're just doing it under the guise of a civilized veneer when it is every bit as insidious and damaging to her. And that was the good part of this book. It does end basically with them meeting and becoming Mr. and Mrs. Vorkosigan, and you know that that's going to result in the main protagonist to his birth, Miles Vorkosigan, in the following books. It is predictable in some ways, but it does have some good twists and turns. I did enjoy it. I will say this, it's a good book. It's a good, solid start to the Vorkosigan Saga, but it's not great. This isn't a great book. It's not a great SF book, but it is a good, solid start to the series. I did enjoy it. I would give it a 7 to a 7.5 out of 10. Which takes us to the next book, your alternative start to the Vorkosigan Saga, Falling Free, which has absolutely nothing to do with Vorkosigans at all, other than it's just set in the same universe. And I'll read you the back of this book to try to orientate you, I said. Not reorientate, but initially orientate you here to this book. Leo Graff was just your average, highly efficient engineer. Mind your own business, fix what's wrong, and move on to the next job. Everything neat and according to spec, just the way he liked it. But all that changed on his assignment to K Habitat. Could you just stand there and allow the exploitation of hundreds of helpless children merely to enhance the bottom line of a heartless megacorporation? And so this is what you've got going on in this book. It's got nothing to do with Baryar. It's got nothing to do with Beta Colony. It's got nothing to do with the Vorkosigans. It's about a corporation that has created its own line of mutated human beings called quaddies. And the reason that they're called quaddies is because instead of having 2 arms and 2 legs, they have 4 arms, and they are designed to be able to operate in 0G conditions with maximum efficiency, hence the need for 4 arms, where they can outfit and retrofit spaceships and other types of objects, large objects in space where you need to work in 0 gravity. And that's going to be their corporation's economic advantage over their competitors so that they can be more efficient and get more contracts. So they breed 1,000 or so of these quaddies, and they're very young. They're teenagers and below. They have them all in this station, and all of a sudden they lose their contract. And no longer is this going to be profitable, and they have to decide how they're going to take care of this expense line that is 1,000 of these human mutants. And again, you have Leo Graff, who's an engineer on here. He learns about this idea that the corporation is going to have to write off this expenditure somehow and he realizes that the Quaddies are going to wind up being quote unquote forgotten to death. In other words, they're going to cease to get budgets, they're going to cease to get payments, they're going to get shunted to the side and moved aside and moved aside and transferred until eventually they just die out and they'll be quote unquote forgotten to death. And I thought that was one of the best lines out of the book here. It takes a very predictable trajectory, a very predictable plot arc, where Leo Graff then organizes a revolt by the Quaddies, and the revolt goes forward with predictable results. I did think that there was a better ending to this. I thought there was a better book contained in here than the one that Lois McMaster Bujold wrote. I thought it would have been far more interesting if the Quaddies had been forgotten nearly to death, and then after being forgotten and shunned aside and left to basically just die out in their lives, have themselves expire and disappear off of the corporate ledger sheet, that they then learned what it was to become hardened Quaddies and built up their character and filled them with a desire to come back and take revenge upon the corporation. I thought that that would have actually been a little more interesting, this book here. This book did win the Nebula Award in 1988 as Best Science Fiction Book of the Year. I'm a little amazed at that because it's not that great. It's okay. It's okay. This is an okay book. In my opinion, in no way, shape, or form deserved to win the Nebula Award for Best Science Fiction Book of the Year. I don't know, maybe 1988 was a very thin year for science fiction. It was all right. It's very predictable. The characters in here are pretty much flat, one-dimensional. There's not a lot that happens in here that isn't you can't see coming from about 300 miles away. And I thought it was an interesting premise about a corporation breeding a bunch of Quaddies in order to get a corporate edge, a business edge, and then having to write it off, and how that would affect all of these mutants that they had created. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot going on in this book. I would give it 6.5 to a 7 for this Nebula Award-winning book here of Falling Free. But between this book here, Falling Free, and Shards of Honor, you've got the two books that are generally considered to be the start of the Vorkosigan Saga. I am looking forward to the next one, The Warrior's Apprentice. I think that is, in my vague memory at this point, going back decades, I think that's where we get into more of the main story trajectory, the main story arc here of the Vorkosigan Saga. And I'm expecting this novel, this series, to pick up considerably here. In the next book, which hopefully I will get you that guy's review, here in the next couple of weeks. It's late. I'm stuttering over my words. I want to get this up for tomorrow morning, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. And I'm going to say take care, be safe, and I will catch you guys next time with the next issue of the Vorkosigan Saga.